The soft glow of neon lights danced against the evening sky as Terence eased his weathered pickup into a spot outside Elliot's tap room, a humble bar tucked off Highway 74 in North Carolina. It wasn't upscale or trendy, just a familiar stop for locals long-haul drivers and wanderers in search of a cold drink and some peace and quiet. Terence, only a week back from deployment, was craving exactly that, a brief moment of calm before facing the pressures of normal life again. He pushed the worn door open, stepping into a warm wave of conversation and the low rumble of a jukebox playing Johnny Cash. His eyes swept the space, recognizing the familiar mix. A few pool players trading jokes, a group of regulars laughing near the bar, and scattered patrons lost in their own quiet. He hadn't come to socialize, just to catch his breath, choosing a corner table near the back, tucked away. But with a full view of the room, his fatigues blended into the low lighting, the only contrast. His battered sneakers chosen for ease, not fashion. He ordered a water and took small sips, his thoughts wandering to the family he was finally going to reunite with after so many long months. His mother's home cooking and the eager chatter of his niece were the only things on his mind until the door banged open. Jolting him back, 6 men marched in their boots heavy against the old wood floor. They were older, wearing worn leather jackets decorated with patches and insignias, clearly veterans themselves. They were loud, boisterous, clapping backs and trading laughs as they approached the bar. Terence gave them a brief glance before returning to his drink, but the group's leader, a broad-shouldered man with a peppered beard and intense gaze, paused mid-laugh. When he spotted Terence, he whispered to the others, and they all turned. Their jokes fell silent, replaced by a thick tension that crept across the space. Terence could feel their eyes on him, but didn't return the look. He'd felt that kind of gaze before, one that measured him, judged him with no background. He quietly sipped his water, focusing instead on jukebox, trying to block out the tightening air around him. That tension hung in the air like static. Near the bar, the group leaned in closer, speaking in hushed, deliberate tones. The broad-shouldered man in charge muttered something under his breath, and one of the others let out a snide laugh, tossing a deliberate glance toward Terence. Though Terence appeared at ease, shoulders loose, body calm, he remained on high alert. Years in uniform had trained him to stay cool beneath pressure. Still, the pointed attention from the men didn't go unnoticed. What was supposed to be a quiet evening had just taken a turn he hadn't planned for. The soft rhythm of the jukebox faded beneath the heavy stomp of boots as the group marched toward his corner table. Leading the way, the older man with the graying beard kept his gaze fixed on Terence like a predator tracking its target. Even before they arrived, Terence sensed the change in the air. What had been relaxed murmurs and casual banter now slipped into a stiff hush. The bartender hesitated, bottle mid-pour, while familiar patrons cast uneasy looks in the group's direction. Terence lowered his glass and leaned back in his seat, keeping his posture unbothered, though every fiber of him was poised. "Hey," the leader barked, halting just a couple of feet from the table. His tone was coarse and lined with derision. "Nice uniform. Pick it up at a costume shop." Snickers erupted behind him, thick with ridicule. Terence glanced up, face composed. He'd weathered worse. "It's mine," he said evenly. "I earned it." The older man arched a brow, pretending to be amused. "Earned it? Huh, that's strange. I've known plenty of real servicemen. None of them wear sneakers with camo. You trying to score pity points, maybe looking for someone to buy your drink." Terence's jaw tightened just a hair, but his voice stayed calm. "I'm not looking for pity or a handout. I just came to unwind." The man grinned, stepping in closer until his beer, sour breath hung heavy in Terence's face. "You don't strike me as any kind of soldier," he sneered. "Where's your boots? Where's your tags? Hell, I bet you don't even know how to salute." Another voice piped up from behind him. "Bet he couldn't tell a rifle from a radio." Someone else added, "Guy probably hasn't even been near a real deployment." The group burst out laughing again, their jeers clashing with the soft hum of the jukebox. Terence remained silent, eyes calmly scanning the men. He wasn't afraid, but he wasn't about to escalate things either. His time in the military had taught him when to engage and when to stand down, but this moment grated on him. It wasn't just the insults. It was their arrogance, their ignorance. "I don't have anything to prove to you," Terence said at last, his tone steady and controlled. The leader, clearly irritated by Terence's composure, stepped in even closer, his broad shoulders casting a shadow across the table. "You think you're some kind of hero," he growled, "strolling in here like you've earned a seat. Far as I see it, you don't belong." The atmosphere froze. A hush fell over the room. Terence didn't flinch. He met the man's stare evenly. "I've done 3 tours overseas," he said, voice unwavering, though edged with steel. "I don't need your permission to be anywhere." The laughter faded for a beat. The leader hesitated, his tough facade cracking beneath the weight of Terence's words. But pride is a stubborn thing. Instead of backing down, he scoffed. "Yeah, then prove it. Show us your tags. Otherwise, you're just another fraud." Terence's gaze swept over the rest of the group. Some shifted uncomfortably, clearly less confident now, but none stepped in to stop it. He took a slow breath, tamping down the urge to rise to the bait. "I don't owe you proof," he replied, "but if you're thinking about starting something here, you might want to reconsider." The tension in the bar thickened. The bartender's hand hovered near the phone, prepared to make a call. Patrons fidgeted in their seats, glancing between the 2 men. Still, the leader held his ground. His smirk returned, Douglier this time, edged with menace. "You've got a slick tongue," he muttered. "Let's find out if your hands can back it up." The air felt like it might snap under the strain. Then he moved. With a sudden lunge, he reached for Terence's collar reckless, driven more by ego than skill. But that was all it took to tip the balance. Terence didn't think. He just acted. Years of discipline took over in an instant. His movement was sharp, efficient. He dodged the grab effortlessly, catching the man's wrist mid-swing. With a smooth and practiced motion, Terence twisted the arm behind the man's back and drove him forward, pinning him face down against the edge of the table. A sharp cry of pain escaped the man's lips, his false bravado dissolving instantly. Gasps rippled through the bar, the room now buzzing with tension as the other bikers froze in place, staring in shock at their restrained leader. No one moved. Then Terence's voice cut through the quiet, measured, steady, and filled with unmistakable authority. "I warned you not to push it," he said, leaning in close. His grip was firm but controlled. "You don't know who you're dealing with." The man struggled against the hold, but Terence's calculated strength left no opening for escape. From across the room, one of the bikers took a cautious step forward, palms raised halfway as if to de-escalate. "Hey, man," he said nervously. "Let him go. He wasn't trying to start anything." Terence looked up, locking eyes with the speaker. His voice stayed cool and unwavering. "He came at me. You saw it. If you want him released, tell him to cool off." The bartender, who had been silently observing with a phone clutched in one hand, finally broke the silence. "Maybe it's time you all took off before this gets uglier." But the leader, Hank, as one of his crew had called him, wasn't ready to give up. Even pinned and humiliated, he snarled through clenched teeth, "Call the cops. This guy assaulted me. He's wearing a phony uniform, and I want him arrested." Terence let go, giving Hank a final shove. Hank staggered forward, clutching his wrist, and shot a venomous glare at Terence. "You'll regret this." He growled, hatred simmering in his voice. The rest of the gang closed in behind him, emboldened by their leader's outrage. One of them pulled out his phone, his hands trembling as he dialed. "Yeah, we've got someone here pretending to be a soldier," he said loudly, making sure the whole bar heard, "and he just attacked my friend." Terence didn't move. His face remained unreadable, though his thoughts raced. He understood exactly how the situation looked, and how quickly it could escalate. But deep down, he knew he was in the right. He had done nothing wrong. His years in uniform, the sacrifices he'd made, everything he represented, stood as quiet proof against their baseless claims. All he needed to do was remain composed. Inside the bar, quiet whispers grew louder, buzzing through the crowd. Some patrons looked unsure, while others showed subtle signs of admiration for how calmly Terence had taken control. Yet no one came forward to challenge the incident or offer support. Then came the sirens, slicing through the heavy silence outside. Red and blue lights flickered across the bar's front windows, creating dancing shadows across the walls and faces inside. The police had arrived. The doors opened wide and 2 officers entered. One, a tall man with broad shoulders and a cropped haircut, wore mirrored sunglasses that made it hard to read his thoughts. Beside him, a female officer carried a sharp, calm gaze that scanned the space with practiced care. Their presence hushed the room completely. Every gaze turned their way. We received a call about a disturbance. The male officer announced, his voice firm but composed, "Can someone tell us what happened?" Still clutching his wrist and red, faced from the encounter, Hank was quick to speak up. He raised a trembling finger toward Terence. "That guy assaulted me, and he's pretending to be military. Look at him, he doesn't even have proper boots." The officer turned his attention to Terence, who remained at his table, alert yet composed. "Is that true?" he asked, his voice giving nothing away. Terence calmly shook his head, eyes meeting the officer's. "No, sir. These men confronted me because they didn't believe I'm actually military. When he reached for me, I defended myself." The female officer stepped forward, sweeping her gaze over the patrons. "Did anyone see what actually happened?" she asked, her tone calm but direct. The bartender broke the silence. "I did. Hank started it. That man just defended himself. It wasn't assault." A ripple of agreement moved through the crowd. A customer near the jukebox chimed in, "Yeah, he never instigated anything. Hank's been acting tense since the moment he got here." The male officer returned his attention to Terence. "Do you have any proof of military service, sir?" Terence gave a steady nod, careful not to make any sudden movements. As he motioned toward the duffel bag resting near his table in that bag, "You'll find my uniform with my rank and name along with my ID and wallet. You're welcome to verify it." The officer approached the bag, unzipping it with care, and pulled out the neatly folded uniform decorated with proper insignias and patches. He examined it briefly, then looked to his partner, who gave a subtle nod. "You check out." The male officer said, his tone respectful but firm. "Thanks for cooperating." Hank, still cradling his wrist and wounded ego, barked, "You're just going to believe that." He could have faked all of it. The female officer gave Hank a sharp glare. "That's enough. From what I gathered, you started this, and you should be grateful. He's not pressing assault charges against you." Hank flinched as the words landed. His earlier confidence dissolving quickly, his group shifted, awkwardly trying to avoid anyone's gaze. "Here's the deal," the male officer said. "We're filing a full report on what happened if you want to pursue it. That's your right, but be advised. False claims carry consequences." Hank opened his mouth, then shut it, realizing he was boxed in. The officers stepped aside, scanning the bar one more time. As the atmosphere slowly loosened, the female officer turned to Terence. "Thanks for staying composed. We'll make sure everything's properly documented." Terence gave her a polite nod, still composed. "Thank you, officer." The bikers began filing out, their swagger gone. Replaced with uneasy silence, Hank cast one last bitter glance at Terence before vanishing out the door. The officers followed soon after, leaving the bar to gradually regain its usual rhythm. Terence returned to his seat, his glass still untouched. The tension lingered, but relief settled in. He was glad it hadn't gone any further around him. Patrons murmured quietly, stealing glances. His way, the suspicion they once held now softened into respect. A few days later, Terence was outside working on his old pickup, parked in the driveway of his modest home on the outskirts of Fayetteville, North Carolina, as the late day sun stretched long shadows across the yard. The late afternoon sun stretched long shadows across the yard as Terence secured a bolt beneath the hood. The events at the bar still lingered, not because of the conflict itself. He'd faced far worse in combat, but for what it symbolized. It wasn't his first time being misjudged, and he knew it likely wouldn't be the last. The crunch of tires on gravel snapped him from his thoughts. He straightened, wiped his hands on a cloth, and turned to spot a motorcycle pulling into the drive. The rider was one of the men from that night, a lanky man with thinning hair and a leather jacket hanging awkwardly on his frame. Terence recognized him, Bill, one of Hank's crew. Bill cut the engine and stepped off slowly, removing his helmet and pausing before approaching. His movements were cautious, like someone trying not to spook a cornered animal. "You're Terence, right?" he asked softly. Terence gave a nod, but didn't reply, letting the silence do the asking. Bill cleared his throat and shoved his hands deep into his jacket pockets. I came by to apologize for what went down at the bar." Terence raised a brow, unconvinced but listening. "You were part of it," he said evenly. "I know." Bill said, his cheeks tinged with shame. "I didn't stop it, and I should have. Hank knows how to stir people up, and I followed along. Doesn't excuse it. I've been thinking about it a lot since then. Just needed to say something." Terence regarded him carefully. Bill's guilt was clear, but so was his honesty. "Why now?" he asked, voice calm. Bill glanced at the gravel beneath his boots and gave a small shrug. "Because it's the right thing to do, and because, seeing the way you handled yourself, it made me realize how off we were. You didn't deserve that." Terence remained quiet for a moment, then leaned back against the truck, folding his arms. "So what is it you want, Bill?" "Forgiveness," Bill replied, lifting his eyes genuine. "But more than that, I want a change. I've seen enough hate in my life. I don't want to be another part of it. What happened? It was wrong, and I need to own that." A subtle shift crossed Terence's face. He'd heard apologies before, some sincere, others just empty noise. But this one felt different, not because of what Bill said, but because of the fact that he came at all. "I respect that you showed up," Terence said at last. "It doesn't change what went down, but it's a beginning." Bill gave a nod, the tension in his face easing. "Thanks, man, really," he said. As he climbed back onto his motorcycle and kicked it to life, Terence stood watching, caught in a quiet swirl of feelings. What happened at the bar had been an ugly wake-up call, a reminder that prejudice still lingered. But Bill's visit, his apology, offered a faint but real sign of progress. It was small, yes, but sincere, and it meant something. Turning back to his truck, Terence wiped his hands on a rag, letting the past few days settle in his thoughts. He understood that the fight against narrow minds wasn't over not by a long shot. Still, he also realized he wasn't in that fight alone. How he chose to live, how he held himself, those decisions could influence others, even if only one person at a time. The evening settled gently around him, the steady buzz of cicadas rising in the distance as he tightened the last bolts. Terence felt grounded, determined. He would keep pressing ahead, not just to survive, but to walk through the world with the same steady resolve and honor that had carried him through his time in uniform. Not every battle happened in combat zones. Some were fought right here, on porches, in dive bars, and inside the hearts of others. And to Terence, those fights were every bit as important.